Hi, Lee.
Hi, Rich.
You've written a fascinating book, Everybody Lives Somewhere, and you're telling us where we live in America, the end of the suburbs. Could you tell us about your title?
Sure. So the main idea behind the book is that after more than half of a century of expansion into the suburbs, the suburbs are really this sort of, more than any other place, the sort of cultural pillar of America. It embodies the American dream. It's very, the image of a house in suburbia is really what so many people strive for. It's where most people live. But that is changing, and it's changing pretty dramatically. These changes happen slowly over time, but every indicator you look at is showing this. We're tiring of this way of life. And the reasons behind that are numerous, and they're complex, and they've been kind of grinding away for a number of years. But the data, the indicators out there, the sort of sense of American people who live in the suburbs, we're really looking at a sort of seismic change in how and where we live. And I just thought that was a really momentous trend and one worth delving into, and so I did.
I'll be very interested to hear about those indicators. But first I wanted to know, what inspired you to write this book, to look at this momentous trend, as you call it?
Sure. Well, I had sort of caught whiffs of kind of headlines about census data showing this or housing data showing that. I mean, there were sort of whiffs of this sort of percolated onto my radar a little bit, and I just thought, that's kind of interesting. I had the sense that there could be something bigger there. And so I started looking into it, and it was sort of the case where, every stone I turned over yielded some other fresh demonstrative proof that something was changing, that our housing preferences were changing, that our migratory patterns were changing, that our demographics were changing. Every aspect I kind of came at this and looked at, where sitcoms are set. I mean, everything was sort of moving away from conventional suburbia and towards not just cities, and we can talk about that a little bit later, but there was a huge movement happening. And I am fascinated by sort of societal trends that really shape how and where we live, trends that sort of, kind of hit us through the zeitgeist. I'm really, really fascinated by those kinds of trends when they're rooted in economic data. And here I kind of had, like a 1-2 punch. I just had this topic that I thought was so all-consuming and affects everyone. And so I decided to really double down and research it and write a book about it.
Fantastic.